Okay, that's it for lesson 2. Let's close out. Let's look back at what we've covered in this week's lesson. Now that we've finished looking over both lessons of emails, you should understand the basic email etiquette and how to write an effective email better. Let's now go over some of the important points of what we've covered in this section on emails. The first thing is know the difference between writing a formal and an informal email. The use of language in emails is very important when writing to other people. We don't write to a good friend in the same way that we would write to a business colleague. So we divide the categories into formal and informal. But there's also a third category, which is not mentioned in this lesson, and is semi-formal. We write semi-formal emails to people that we don't know very well. Now, it's likely that we might write a semi-formal email to a colleague we know well. We work with him, we know him well, but we're not friends. When we write to our colleagues, we might be asking them for something or congratulating them on their promotion or other good news in general. Either way, when we email colleagues, you can address that colleague by their first name if you normally do so face to face. Of course, sometimes we don't know if in an email, if we're writing, should be formal, informal, or a semi-formal email. So here's a good tip to remember. You should always just copy the email style of the person who writes to you, just to be on the safe side. In that way, you're less likely to offend. Second point we learned, always double check your email for any spelling or grammatical mistakes. Spelling a word incorrectly makes the other person think that you're sloppy. We want to leave a good impression. So by rereading and checking your written emails, it shows respect for the other person. A tip for you to remember, most emails have a spell checker and a grammar checker. Make sure you use these once you've finished writing an email and before you send it. If possible, you can have an English native speaker proofread your email, especially if the email is important. The third thing we covered was polite phrases. Would you? Could you? I would like. Thank you. Or I hope you have a great weekend. All these are considered concise and polite and can be used in both formal and informal emails. The fourth thing we covered, avoid writing emails when angry. Don't write an email when you're feeling angry or emotional. It can be very tempting, especially when disagreements become intense. But it's always best not to reply for a while. Take a deep breath and write or reply to the recipient after you've calmed down a little. Otherwise, if you write after an email, an angry exchange, you might say something you'll regret. Plenty of people use contractions in spoken English. It's often best to avoid contractions when writing a formal email. But if you would like to use contractions in your emails, make sure to check if you're using the correct word for contractions, as the meaning of the word is entirely different. For example, he'll, which is short for he will, should not be written as hell. So watch out for the use of contractions. He'll meet you at the studio room, and comparatively, hell meet you at the studio room. Two completely different sentences. The next thing we looked at was quoting original messages. If you'd like to respond to a message in a recipient's email, you can select that specific message, quoting, and then reply to the message before the quoted message. We often use this for inverted commas. When responding to emails, you shouldn't only use words like yes or hi. While you don't need to write a long essay, you should expand your answer. For example, instead of saying no, you say, no, we did not receive the package from Keith Gillibrand. The seventh thing we looked at was apologizing. Apologies in emails contain more or less the same formula. When you state an apology, you should take responsibility for your actions. Be sincere. Give an explanation of the situation, have a statement of regret, and a resolution. For example, for formal emails, you should say, "I apologize for," while in formal emails, you should say, "I'm sorry for." There are 7 major points to remember when writing emails. Once you remember these major points, we can move on to essential habits to develop when it comes to emails. Here are 5 habits you should have. Number 1, don't send an email out when distracted. You're more likely to make spelling mistakes, grammar mistakes when you're distracted. Number 2, bookmark something to read later. If there are plenty of articles or papers that you have to read, you should bookmark them, save them, and read them for later. That way, you don't have to spend so much time hanging out in emails. Third thing, using emojis or smiley faces. Emojis convey a sense of friendliness, but it's better to limit the use of emojis to people you know well, friends or family members. However, there are plenty of situations where the emojis are not appropriate to use at all, especially in business settings where it ruins our professional image. Fourth thing, sort out your emails. We always receive a lot of emails. Some are spam, some are basically emails that are advertising something. When this happens, you should create a filter so that your inbox doesn't get flooded by these unwanted emails. It will lower the amount of emails you receive in your inbox. The fifth thing, close the email when you're done. Once you finish browsing your inbox or you're writing emails, just close it and don't look at it again for the next couple of hours or the following day. We don't want emails to rule our day. Okay. That concludes the 5 essential habits to develop, as well as the major points to remember when writing an email. Writing emails isn't always easy, especially in this era, where almost everyone resorts to texting or instant messaging on their smartphones. So while it's easy to forget the distinction between the two, there are still differences. As long as you remember the pointers and the lessons we've listed out, and keep practicing writing emails, you'll get better at composing an effective email. See you next week for our next lesson and in the forums.